You are the members of the jury. You heard me talking earlier about, how serious it is to be on the jury. But let me start out by either congratulating you or telling you I'm sorry that you're on the jury, that you're chosen, and how important it is that we pay attention and listen through all the detail. The state just gave their take on this situation. Let me just talk to you about some issues and things that I want you to listen to as we go through the proof. And this is going to be a long trial because there's a lot of potential witnesses. Please listen to both sides. David and Karen Swift got married, as the prosecutor said, back in 1989. They'd been together. David Swift had worked at manufacturing management for a period of time. Karen had worked a variety of jobs, part-time and stuff during that time. They had the two boys, and they did get divorced, and they reconciled. They were married in 89, and they got remarried on the same date in 2000. And then after they got remarried in 2000, and there were issues that they both had affairs. They tried to make the marriage work. They had two girls after that. And David Swift continued to work and be the major breadwinner for the family. Karen Swift and David were raising their family. As we move on till 2007, David Swift and Karen moved to Dyersburg because he started working at Tenaris in maintenance management. There were issues with the schools around there. Where he was working wasn't far. People commute. The schools were better in this area. It was a fresh start. And I guess it would be if you're having problems and you're looking to make something work. And so they moved to Dyersburg. David continued to work at Tenaris full-time. Karen was into fitness. She was very fit, very strong. It meant a lot to her. And she would get up early in the morning, sometimes and leave, go to YMCA and go to classes. And it was just, she'd get up early and leave and go. As we move on until closer to 2011, Karen had friends, and they both lived in Dyersburg. They were both busy working. He was busy, David was, and with activities as kids, and she was. She worked part-time occasionally, did some landscape work eventually. And Karen had friends, and as happens in couples sometimes, one changes. And I submit to you that Karen had some friends she used to do activities with that lived around her, and they would do family-type activities, and it kind of started changing with Karen. And it became more of a wanting to drink and to go to clubs or different things like that, especially when she met the bonus. And it became a more frequent thing as we're moving closer to 2011. And it became an issue because something's changing. And in fact, some of her friends her lady friends that she met and made started sort of backing away from her because as she became more active with the bonus, there were issues about conduct and things that were going on, adult parties, things about hot tub parties and with the bonus and her and just some things that maybe some others considered not appropriate. David Swift started hearing about this, noticing that she's gone. They have the girls. They're small. And it becomes more of a frequent thing. She just would go somewhere and then be gone. And there are family responsibilities and things going on. And eventually, she's pretty active with the bonus, and there was some things that happened over there that David personally saw when he went over, and heard about that caused him concern. And it was just some inappropriate conduct. And I think the proof's going to show that this went on. He's still working. He's still doing his part. He's trying to make it work. He's starting, like we talked about earlier, if somebody, you think that something's changing, or if they're not being truthful to you, or they're lying, or they're sneaking out, he checked up on her. He was trying to find out if there was something going on, and trying to find out if what was really going on, if he could trust her or not. As we move on to 2011, David did injure his knee in April of 2011. And the prosecutor referred to it. It was a serious knee injury in April of 2011, and it caused him to have crutches and operation. And we move on, and there's problems with the Bonas, and it becomes, obvious and active at this time that Karen's going away a lot. And so sometime in Karen filed for divorce on October the 10th of 2011. And before that, the Bonas, they're the ones that provided her with another phone. And David and Karen had their plan, through a certain company. And yes, he got the records, but Mr. Bona kept up with Karen also about what her calls were and things. So he gave her a phone, and you have to decide what's the situation here. She's a married woman, and he's given her a phone, and he's also providing her a way to go away, and she's over at their house. They're going to different things. They're going to clubs. They take her to a concert in which she meets up with a guy, and they're sort of encouraging this behavior before she files for divorce and during this time. Karen did file for divorce. It was contested. She filed for divorce, and she did go to Gulf Shores with the Bonas, and she didn't tell David till afterwards, until he found the note. And she took the two girls. The boys one's in college and the other one's getting ready to start college, and that's how he finds out. And so after a few days or a week, she comes back. She didn't ask for an order of protection. She didn't try to get her lawyer to put him out of their house. She goes back and lives in the house where David and the girls are, and his son is. And the other one, the oldest one, I think, is off to college. He's coming back occasionally. So her actions doesn't indicate she was fearful of David. And they're both in the house, and they're both carrying on with their lives. And they see each other. He's trying to figure out what's going to happen, what's going to go on. Is this another situation where we're going to have a problem and then try to work it out? And so that's going on. Around October the 25th of 2011, David re-injured his knee that had originally been seriously injured in April. We know that because the person that saw it, and this is before she goes missing October 30th. I guess the state is trying to tell you that that's some plan to commit murder. But it's an accident. It's an injury. He had the injury, but he re-injured himself. And it had an effect on his knee. And he had like a stabilizer on his knee, a mobilizer thing that he could strap on his left knee. He would wear that, and also had crutches. He couldn't, I submit that medical proof is going to show that it was hard for him to put weight on it, and that it made it stiff and hard to lift up. and to walk a great distance, especially trying to carry something a great distance. Karen at this point will contend was 125 pounds, and people saw him with the crutches and they mobilized her. Now, there's a difference between a hay bale and a lady's body, the weight. And so, and there's proof that David was seen with crutches by different people and at Walmart and at the roller skating rink by some of these witnesses the 2 days before. And you're just going to have to listen to that and decide what you believe. Now, Karen goes missing Sunday morning. On Friday and Saturday, she was cleaning a house in Trimble, Tennessee. She was making some extra money for Habitat. She was cleaning the house. But and she would drive up there and go. And there was a hayride bonfire at the Swift's house where Karen and David are there at their house, and they're having like a little party pre-Halloween for families and kids. And she's there and David's there, and they go get the hay, and they come back, and other people see him there. She's not afraid of him. She's around him. And then Saturday, I submit Karen went and cleaned the house in Trimble, and David went over, saw her, took his daughter with him, brought her lunch. He's still talking to her and trying to help her out and continue on, and a witness saw him. And it just doesn't add up that it's somebody trying to hurt somebody, but it's somebody trying to support somebody. And it may not be, they may be having problems, but can we make it work, or can we be adults about this? Saturday night, after doing the cleanup at Trimble, Karen goes to the party. And she did plan to stay all night. And David didn't call her back and say, come home. You know, her daughter, who was with somebody else that was supposed to spend the night, called her and said, come get me. I don't want to stay here anymore. And then Karen left the bonus, and they had been to the country club, and you know, they had been doing some activities there, drinking, and you know, at the party. And Karen was at and went and picked her daughter up, and then she went home. She came home, and I submit to you that David was there. He said he heard or saw her, and that their children were there, the two girls. And then Sunday morning, October 30th, 2011, Karen goes missing. Now, before we get to that, Karen's plan was to get up Sunday morning and finish cleaning the bathrooms in the house at Trimble. So she would get up early and go do things, go to the gym, or that was her plan, to go to the house in Trimble and finish cleaning it up. And I mean, that's what he understood, or that's what her plan was, and she told other people. So it's not unusual that she'd get up and leave early in the morning. Now, the prosecutor said some things about her car, and her car was found a quarter mile from the house, and it did have a flat tire. And I guess you're going to have to ask yourself, what proof is there of all these things that the prosecutor's alleging or contending? That David, when she come home that Saturday night, early Sunday morning, and I submit there's no proof that David Swift left the house with his two girls there. And the prosecutor says that David Swift murders her and bashes her skull in a violent way in the garage of their home at 65 Willie Johnson Road. And there's nobody that heard any screaming or any any disturbance. And you're going to hear that on that Sunday morning, after David Swift gets up, and there may be things with people using the computer at the house at different times. And the prosecutor said about Karen's phone registering on the extender before and after is consistent with Karen coming in and Karen leaving in her car. It was her car that she got in. Her car that was found down the road. Karen Swift was a attractive woman that people said she could walk in Walmart and guys would go up to her and say things. She left, I contend the proof is she left the house. And there was a neighbor, a Mr. I went blank, hog shooter that lived across from him and down from him. And there was an issue with him poisoning their dog and their neighbor's dogs. And these cell phones were found in an area down from behind where he lived or where he had his property later on. And I don't know, the issue could be, you're going to hear from two different experts about the tires. There's another one that talk about what these tires do show or don't show and what tests were done or not done. This issue with a nail being intentionally drilled into the tire, whether the facts support that or not, you're going to have to decide after listening to both of them. David Swift got up. He does call and look for his wife. After a while, he don't hear from her. He talks to other people. He hears from somebody that he talks to, one of her friends, that she saw her car down the road. I submit to you that witness is going to say he acted like he was genuinely surprised and concerned. And he calls Mrs. Bonner. And he does go ask this lady to watch his children as she's at the mall. He goes to the car, and then he goes to the mall, and then he comes back. And when he comes back, the Bonas are there, and they're out there. They're kind of really involved in Karen Swift's life and all of her activities. And he's concerned about the car's broken down. There's a flat tire. Where is she? And they call the police. Well, Mr. Bona does, to see if she's been arrested or in jail. And David does, but he's not sure what's going on. And it's not unlike Karen to get up and leave. And so before you bring the police in and say something, you want to at least make sure, because it can be embarrassing. But that's what's going on. From there, the law enforcement comes. Law enforcement comes. There's nothing in the car that indicates. The prosecutor said that her body was loaded in her car and driven down there and then driven back. Prosecutor said this grisly murder occurred in her garage, in their garage, while his daughters are in the house, and nobody's heard this. Law enforcement comes down after that this Sunday. Law enforcement comes into the house and looks around that day and in the days after, immediately after. Law enforcement very quickly looks through the house, takes pictures as they're going through, looking for anything unusual or anything that possibly might be questionable. TBI comes out, they're called in. They go through and do extensive analysis, I submit, of the house, of her car. They have search warrants for David's vehicle, too. And they examine all these things. I mean, they go into the crawl space. They look at every bottle or container. They take samples from the garage. They take swabs from the garage to send off. and they send them off for analysis. The prosecutor says there's no scientific proof, and don't concern yourself with it. But extensive things were done to all the things I'm telling you about. The house, all the rooms were looked at, the garage where he says this grisly thing happened, and her car, and also all the vehicles in the area around his house. They do walk down the road. They do continue searching and do all kinds of things. You're going to say there's proof that the cell phones were found behind where Mr. Hogshooter lived. There were issues with the neighbor they had a problem with. But if her car is on the side of the road down from where you live and it has a flat tire, issues about did she get out? What did she do? Who came up? I don't know, but there's no proof David Swift left the house during this time frame until he came out with his daughter and sees her vehicle after hearing about it, comes out looking for her after she's already gone, after he hears her car's out, with a flat tire, and he starts looking for her. There's no proof in the house or the garage or any of these physical things, and they did a lot of tests. They did do a lot of tests. They did blood tests. They did DNA tests. They did do ballistics tests. I don't know why, but they did. They took his weapons and did ballistic tests. I mean, they did a lot of things over a period of time. Her body was found December the 10th of 2011 down at Bledsoe Cemetery. Some of the witnesses involved saw before that, driving down by the cemetery, people out there looking through the cemetery. It's an area out near the cemetery, real close. But I don't know. But her body is formally found December the 10th, 2011, down the road. It's about 2.9 miles away from the house. And yes, she had damage to her skull. Yes, it was an injury to her skull, and the medical examiner tell you about it. He said it was a homicide, blunt force trauma, and that was the cause of her death. None of her clothes were found. Her panties were pulled down when they found her body. And I'm not trying to be crass or anything, but her panties were pulled down below, down towards her knees. It could look like a sexual assault. There was no semen found or DNA on the panties, but I don't know. But that's the state they found her body. And I'm not saying that to belittle or anything, but it looked like an assault. None of her clothes were found. None of her clothes, other than in her car, it looked like she had changed out of her clothes at the party. And her clothes were found in her car. There was no blood found in her car, her blood, or anything that indicated that her body had been loaded in her car like the prosecutor said. These are things you need to look at and think about. He says, don't concern yourself if there's no scientific test. There's no proof through science or whatever, but they did a lot of things here. And what they don't show, he's trying to, I just submit, you got to ask yourself, is that realistic or reasonable? Now, after that, David Swift talked to him several times that day. He did call law enforcement. They did talk to him. They talked to him several times. He told him about his injury. It was just a fact of his state, how he was, at that point. But the prosecutor is making it seem like David Swift murdered her in their own home, in their garage, and there's no scientific evidence to back any of that up or proof of that. I submit to you there's no proof of where it occurred. Did somebody pick her up? I don't know, but He doesn't have to prove he's innocent. I'm not saying that, but there's no proof to back anything up that the prosecutor's saying about the location of the garage or anything of that, or her car. So those are things that I think you should concern yourself with. After that, 2011, he talked to him several times. They came back to the house several times. He agreed to let them come and search. Like I said, they even looked at the cleanup bottle out next to the pool. He had a bottle of bleach out there, and they checked it to see if there was anything on it. So they measured everything under the house. They looked at everything. In some ways, I've not seen as much documentation as I've seen in this case about those things, in some of the cases I've seen. After that, things go on. Nobody's charged for a long period of time. This is 2011. It becomes mentioned in a race for sheriff and the race for the district attorney's office that nothing's been done. Better do something about it. And over time, in 2022, the indictment was issued. After all those years, there's been no scientific breakthrough or anything other than what we just talked about. There's been nothing new that's come in or anything. After all this time, there was a charge. And it's important about proof, about asking, how do you prove what you're claiming? And so I ask you all, I could sit and talk about a lot of things here, but this is some of the issues that are going to be involved, some of the major issues. Sometimes when people are going through a divorce, they start talking about each other, both sides. They want you to understand how they've been wronged. And I submit to you, both parties were doing that before. And so, or sometimes they just want to talk to somebody about how they feel. So please listen to all the questions and all the witnesses. And those are issues that I think you should look at as we're going through this trial. Thank you.